now we turn our attention to Paolo Banchero. Like Chet Holmgren and Jabari Smith, Paolo Banchero, one-and-done prospect. He played at Duke, helped the Blue Devils win the ACC, and make the Final Four in Coach K's final season. Deadleg, where are you on Paolo as an NBA prospect?
I'm more bullish on him now than I was, I think, a year ago. I remember you being all in on him, rightfully so. I mean, he was highly regarded, discussed as a future number one pick when he was a high school prospect. I remember when we saw him, man, was that Colorado Springs? Has it really been? It really has been that long. That's incredible.
Colorado Springs, pre-pandemic.
What a different world that was. It was undeniable at that point. It's like, this dude is going to go into college and be awesome. And he was 17.2 points, 7.8 rebounds, 3.2 assists, and shot 48% from the field, 34% from three at Duke last season. He was really, really good. I tell you what, GP, I reserve the right to change my mind, but I'm getting closer and closer to thinking that he's going to wind up having. Every year I do a mock draft, and my mock draft is, here's my guess. I guess this kind of doubles as a big board, if you will, but it's like, I'm going to do a mock draft, and I'm literally going to say, I'm not going to try and predict how teams are going to pick. No. I'm going to project out who's going to have the best NBA careers in this class, right? I think I might put Banchero number one when I do that mock draft. There's so much here that I like. And because I think he's going to have the best combination of everything. He has got strong body, 6'10", about 240 or so pounds, maybe 250. Although he's listed 250. This is one of those deals where, I was with Duke and Banchero for the final 5 weeks of the season, right? I mean, he could be. He's a big guy.
His legs.
Big time. But 250's big. I'm not saying he's not, but it seemed like he was keeping himself.
He's got 100 pounds in each of those legs.
He damn well might.
Each leg is 100 pounds, and then the rest of his body is 50.
Incredible base. So he's got the NBA physicality right now, day one. He can square up and shoot. He can work back to the basket. He can pass. Terrific NBA frame. I think I know we said that Jabari Smith probably has the highest floor, probably. I think Banchero's floor is higher. I think he's the least likely bust of any projected top 6-7 guy in the draft. I think he's the least likely because defensively, I know he's going to be, there will be some room to improve. I get that. But, man, he still has smarts on that end of the floor. He has a three-point shot. That's good. Could get better. Can put it on the deck and penetrate. Can bring it up the floor. When he gets going downhill, obviously it's a huge problem. Can shoot from all three ranges. To me, if you went back 20 years, because I think in some ways, not in a lot of ways, but in some ways I can see and I haven't heard anyone say this, but maybe it's been put out there, but there's some Carmelo Anthony-ish stuff to Paolo Banchero in terms of his offensive arsenal. If you went back to that 2003 draft and you put Banchero in, that was LeBron still goes number one, obviously. But Darko, Carmelo, Banchero, Banchero to me, he's even better than what Carmelo was coming out of Syracuse. There's so much more there. And look what Carmelo became. I think he's going to have a wonderful opportunity and chance to average north of 17, 18 points a game in the NBA. And I think he's a great passer. He is a passer who's always looking to get better in how he distributes. I remember hearing that from the coaching staff down there, seeing Duke up close and personal so many times. You might not think of him as a distributor, but his willingness to move the ball in Duke's offensive scheme and to get it to guys in different kind of ways. He's so big, he could see over the defense, skip passes, feed in, move the ball around. Man, that helped make Duke one of the 5 to 7 best teams in the country. I think you can run. For me, GP, the reason why I really like him, and I don't think he'll go number one, but I would not be stunned if he did, and I wouldn't reject the premise if he did. I think he deserves to be in this conversation. It's not a Chet and Jabari conversation as far as I'm concerned. You can plug Banchero into an offense in year one, and you can run some stuff through him just as easily as you can make him another cog in the wheel, depending on opponent, possession, all that. You and I mentioned on the Chet podcast, we think Orlando probably knows who it's taking at this stage. There's still a chance they might be debating. There's still that chance. Banchero deserves a very long look to me. I think he has the best chance, not to say he's guaranteed to be the best. My feeling on Banchero now is he has the best chance of having the best career 10, 12 years down the road.
Yeah, I'm with you on this one. I reject the idea that this is a 2-player draft and Paulo's not in that group. I tell you, like when I prep for these episodes, I really dive in, and this happens every year. I go at it and I go, man, how you pass on this guy?
This guy's so good.
Yeah. Like I dove into Chet and I'm like, I don't see how you pass on this guy. And then I dove into Jabari and I was like, Jesus Lord, how are you going to pass on this guy? And then I dove into Paolo and I'm like, this is really the guy that's going to go third in the draft. Maybe that's what some people think, because there's a lot of stuff already there. You mentioned, well, first let's go back to Colorado Springs, because that was like late July, August 2019. Yeah. So pre-pandemic, he was getting ready to start his junior year of high school, and he was working out. They're playing scrimmage, whatever they were doing. And I was sitting with a coach of a blue blood program who had a preseason top 10 team. And he said, Paulo could start for us right now. He had just finished his sophomore year of high school. This coach is coach of a blue blood program who had a preseason top 10 team. He said he would start for us right now. And since then, he's just gotten bigger, stronger, more skilled. The latest numbers I saw were 6'10", 250, 7'1" wingspan. NBA body already. Big, strong skill. Great mid-range scorer. Can catch it, bounce it a couple of times, shoot over a defender. Because at Duke, he was often guarded on the perimeter by smaller guys. And he just, you shoot right over him. You try to put a bigger guy on him, he'll go right past him. Very good passer, like you noted. He averaged 3.2 assists per game. He could drive and kick it, a lot of skip passes. An above average passer for a guy his size. A lot of big-to-big passing with Mark Williams, lobs, he could drop it off. He's incredible offensively. The concerns are, and they're very minor concerns. Like I think the concerns with him are maybe smaller than they are certainly with Holmgren and perhaps with Jabari Smith as well. Because with Jabari Smith, like you got to figure out, can you really just, get him the ball and let him go play make? Because he really didn't do a lot of that at Auburn. With Paolo, you can. Like he's ready to play make, get his own shot, all that stuff right now. He can pass out of double teams. Like he is really gifted offensively. Not just with Jabari, a lot of it is he's just 6'10" shooter right now. Paulo's a 6'10" player. Like he can do all those things. The questions become, what's he going to be defensively? Because at Duke, like we don't have to lie to each other, he just wasn't very good. He's not a top shelf athlete. Good athlete, but not top shelf athlete. Doesn't have great lateral quickness. And so he'd get lost sometimes on defense, seem to lose focus a little bit on defense. And perhaps some of that is just, age, also being, carrying such a responsibility on the offensive end. You got to rest somewhere. Like, I'm not real concerned with it, but that is a concern. Like Jabari Smith, I think, can be a plus defender. Chet Holmgren, could be a first team all defense guy. Can Paulo be adequate on that end of the court? And then the other question is, what's he going to be from 3-point range? Because he only shot 33.8% from three. But I'm a believer that he's going to be a real 3-point shooter. Mm-hmm. And he's strong enough to play small ball 5. Like he might guard centers a lot. And actually that might turn him into a better defender or less of an issue on defense because, he might not be able to stay in front of wings and even modern 4s, in the NBA. But like he can stay in front of 5s and he's strong enough to deal with them. Like I could see him playing a lot of 5 on the defensive end of the court. And if you can, the problem with that is I don't know that he's a great rim protector, but like whatever, we're nitpicking at this point.
Yeah.
really the only questions for me is what's he going to be on defense, and is he going to be a real three-point shooter? And I think he can be good enough defensively. I think he's going to be a good three-point shooter because the shot doesn't look broken. He just, he shot it's an okay percentage, but it wasn't great. I think he's going to be a real three-point shooter. I think he can be adequate defensively. And the other stuff is all there it's easy to see. I know I've said I would take Chet Holmgren number 1, and I would, but it's tough. This is tough for me. Picking between Holmgren, Banchero, and Smith is really tough. And if somebody were to make the argument for Banchero going first, even though most people don't believe he will now, but if somebody were making the argument for it, you wouldn't have to work too hard to sell me on it. He's a totally reasonable option.
As a reminder, Magic, obviously, number 1, Oklahoma City have number 2, Rockets, as we record this podcast, have the number 3 pick. It will be interesting to see, and we'll get into this stuff more on a mock episode as we get closer to the draft, if any of these teams want to trade out or not. I would think not. Again, we focused on these 3 players with these 3 teams this week because it's such a fascinating discussion to be had about really what do you value? Who do you think is going to hit? Maybe all of them hit. It's hard to, it's not that hard to see how they wouldn't all hit. Now, with Banchero specifically on the defensive end, I think it's also important to note that he was playing alongside one of the best defenders in the country, the ACC Defensive Player of the Year, and Mark Williams, a guy who numbers coming out of the combine measurements, were just ridiculously good. And Mark Williams might play himself into top 10 overall status. There's certainly a case to be made there. And maybe even on some sort of level, not this would excuse Banchero's defensive performance, but man, it would be all too understandable playing next to Wendell Moore Jr., also a very, very, very good defender, very good, and Mark Williams. You just know, you got a lot of things covered up for you there. Just doesn't need to be as good at that level. Doesn't excuse him not being a better defender, because I think that he can be better than what his reputation is. I'm also, the more and more we do this, I'm also like, you know what? Sometimes the knocks on defense, while valid, it's like, but if he's going to go out and be the kind of player who can get you 21 and 10 and be a productive, super plus addition on the offensive end of the floor, then he'll be fine on the defensive end. Will be able to overcome that. Sometimes, and I'm not saying that you're doing this, but sometimes when we get into pre-draft process, GP, and I understand, particularly for front offices, you have to scrutinize so many things. It's like Steve Nash was a 2-time MVP, horrendous on defense, and yet he should have clearly been he was one of the 2 or 3 best players in it. At a certain point, one thing offsets the other,
Right. Well, Ja Morant. Is not good defensively, but the Grizzlies about to give him $200 million.
Who the hell? And by the way, not that he shouldn't get better, GP, but it's and who the hell cares?
Right. Well, it's interesting because the Grizzlies this season were really good without Ja Morant. They were really good with Ja Morant, but they won more without Ja Morant. And people ask why. Jesus, nobody thinks they're better without Ja Morant. That's nonsensical. But why do they win at such a high level without Ja Morant? Because they become the best defensive team in the NBA. You want to know why? Because Ja Morant's no longer playing. So you put Tyus Jones, who's a plus defender. Now you got Tyus Jones, Dylan Brooks, Jaren Jackson Jr. They go from a whatever defensive team to the best defensive team in the NBA when Ja Morant disappears. So, Ja Morant's also about to be second team All NBA, right? He's a legitimate MVP candidate. So I'm with you on that. Sometimes and that's what the draft process is. You're looking at everything, and you're, what are some positive? What are some negatives? What are some strengths? What are some weaknesses? So that's why I bring it up here, because you want to get to a point where you say, what are some of the perceived weaknesses? But I'm with you. If you tell me somebody's great offensively, we'll figure out a way to get them good enough defensively or hide them, but they're going to play.